Hey guys, and welcome to the Ban Rants channel, your home for NFL projections, predictions, and of course, your periodic rant. And in this video, we're going to be doing a quarterback poll. I'm going to be polling every quarterback for all 32 teams on the tier level. Now, you might find one of my ratings to be in poor taste, and again, I'm doing this as best I can to be unbiased. I'm not saying anybody is better than anybody here. This is just based on where I think they pair up in terms of tiers. So we're going to get into that. I'm going to give my opinions on some of these quarterbacks, but before I do, please make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and let's get started. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and rank all of the quarterbacks just by team. We'll start with New Orleans, and you have Jameis Winston. It could be Taysom Hill, but I'm assuming it's Winston. A lot of these teams that have, two people you could argue as the starter, I'm going to rank solely on one. And if it ends up being somebody else, I'll be more than happy to change it. But Jameis Winston, he threw for 5,000 yards at one point and 30 turnovers, which in my opinion is really not that great. I think Winston probably goes on the D tier on the top end. He has some spark in him. I think that maybe with the right coordinator, like maybe it is Sean Payton that ends up bringing the best out of him as a head coach, but we'll see what happens. Right now, I'm not overly impressed, but I don't think he's a bust. Derek Carr on the Raiders. Derek Carr is a very underrated quarterback, in my opinion. I think Derek Carr is on the low end of the B tier. I think that he actually does have a lot of potential. I don't necessarily think he's, top of the line. But in terms of stability at the position, I think that obviously people think they can do better, and maybe they're right. But Derek Carr is not a bad quarterback. Next up, Josh Allen on the Bills. Josh Allen, this is in the A tier. Josh Allen has really taken a positive stride the last couple of years. Early on, he looked like he'd probably fizzle out in the B or C tier and be average, but he's taken some really good strides. And having Stephon Diggs last year just, I think, gave him a Pro Bowl nod. And Josh Allen is easily the second best quarterback in the 2018 draft class. You could argue first best, but I think obviously a couple other quarterbacks have something to say about that. And speaking of best quarterbacks, Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers. Look, you say whatever you want about Aaron Rodgers, whether you like him, whether you don't, whether you think the refs help him out, whether you think they don't. I'm not saying they do. I'm not making that kind of claim. I'm obviously unbiased here. I'm a fan of Aaron Rodgers. I actually think he's a great quarterback. I think he belongs in the S tier easily. I'm not even going to get into that. There's no debate. Aaron Rodgers has made mountains out of molehills. Next up, we have the Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa. We didn't really see enough of Tua last year to really convince me he's great or bad. The jury is still out on Tua, in my opinion. I'll put him in the C tier because we can't really judge him. Next up is Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield is, everybody thinks he's S tier, A tier. Why? Mayfield was arguably irrelevant until Kevin Stefanski came to Cleveland, and he looked okay last year, but I don't think he necessarily looked like an A tier quarterback, S tier quarterback. I think he'd be in the B tier right behind Derek Carr. I think that Mayfield gets way too much credit. I think a lot of Browns quarterbacks have always gotten too much credit. But do I think he's terrible? No. I just don't think he's as good as people are hyping him up to be. But someone I do think could be that good down the road is Trevor Lawrence with Jacksonville. Lawrence has not taken an NFL snap yet, so he goes in the C tier because we can't judge him. Jared Goff, D tier. I've never been a fan of Jared Goff. I never will be. Jared Goff, in my opinion, I could be a real jerk and put him in the F tier. But he looked okay with the Rams. I mean, he wasn't, the worst thing in the world, but he also just didn't excel the way people expected him to as a number one pick, and it's unfair because he falls in the same category as Jameis Winston. But Winston has at least shown he can throw 5,000 yards, whereas Jared Goff has not. And he's shown that he can get to a Super Bowl and not score a single touchdown. Next up is Minnesota, Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins also, I think, is overrated. He got a little bit better the year the Vikings made the playoffs with him, and he finally got a playoff win that year. But I think Cousins also benefits from having a decent offense around him. I think that he isn't really somebody that can make mountains out of molehills like S-tier quarterbacks can. I think Cousins will probably be at the very top of the C tier. I don't think he's terrible, but I think that he is a bit overhyped. Goatman, great, S tier. Obviously, I'm not even going to get into that. Let's not even waste our time. There's no debate. Bears, I'm assuming that the starter is Andy Dalton. Just so we're clear, if it does end up being Justin Fields on day one, it goes in the C tier because we haven't seen him in the NFL yet take a snap. Dalton goes at the top of the D tier, above, I'll say right behind Winston. Dalton has never really been somebody clutch. He's known to choke in big games. But Dalton, is he terrible? He's not great. I think he's mediocre. But, I mean, you're not going to win a Super Bowl with Andy Dalton. Let's get that clear. Matt Ryan in Atlanta. Now, here's where this is probably Atlanta's shining star right now. Their saving grace is Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan, I'm going to actually give him a little bit of a benefit and put him at the bottom of the A tier. And here's why. Matt Ryan, I could easily say he's got an MVP award that puts him there, but that's not an argument. Matt Ryan is there because whether the Falcons as a whole are stable, Matt Ryan has actually done pretty well. I mean, Matt Ryan, in my opinion, is very underrated, mainly because the Falcons as a whole choke in big moments. But Atlanta, Matt Ryan, he's probably the most stable player they've had at the position since they had Michael Vick in his early years, since they somehow made the decision to trade Brett Favre, which didn't age well. But Matt Ryan, I think, belongs in the A tier at the bottom end. Ben Roethlisberger on the Steelers, I'll put him right behind Matt Ryan in the A tier. Having no losing record in your entire career is pretty impressive. Roethlisberger isn't really somebody that's really wowed anybody. He's been to 3 Super Bowls, winning 2, not a single Super Bowl MVP. But Ben Roethlisberger's not terrible. I almost said Matt Ryan again. But Ben Roethlisberger, he's not top of the line, but he is above average. Next, we have the Steelers' arch rival Baltimore Ravens and Lamar Jackson. Now, a lot of people are going to probably hate the fact that I'm not putting Lamar Jackson in the A tier, in the B tier. I'm actually going to put him at the very bottom of the S tier. And I know what you guys are thinking. Always a running back. Just hear me out. Just hear me out for a minute. Lamar Jackson is a different type of quarterback. Is he better than Aaron Rodgers? Is he better than Goatman? No. But he's in a league of his own, meaning that he won the league MVP a couple of years ago for leading the league in touchdown passes and being able to do the things he does. Lamar Jackson is a clutch quarterback. And they won their first playoff game last year, and if this is an upward trend, we know where Lamar Jackson's heading. He's heading for a Super Bowl trophy at some point. Obviously, we'll see what happens this year with the new wide receivers. That is really going to make or break him being in the S tier. We've seen Lamar Jackson make mountains out of molehills. Now he's going to have more passing weapons. We'll see what happens. Joe Burrow, again, we didn't get to see much of him in his rookie year because of injuries, but what I saw was pretty positive. I'll leave him in the C tier again because I can't give him any higher just based on fairness, but I'll put him above Tua because we saw more of him than Tua. Dak Prescott, Dallas. Dak Prescott is another quarterback who is extremely overrated, in my opinion. I mean, you got Baker Mayfield and Dak Prescott, 2 very overrated quarterbacks. Dak, in my opinion, I'll probably put him I'll put him above Carr and Mayfield in the B tier, but I'm being generous. I think there's other quarterbacks that can be above him in the B tier. Dak never really looked that great until Amari Cooper got there, and even before that, 95% of his playbook was handing it off to Elliott. Now, people like Dak Prescott because of the Cowboys, and obviously people have their opinions on their quarterback. I was never a fan of Dak Prescott. I never will be. Moving on to Deshaun Watson. Look, I know, obviously I'm not going to really get into Deshaun's off-the-field issues. We're not talking about that. We're talking about on the field. And on the field, Deshaun Watson is an S tier. And Obviously, seeing the Texans in the S tier will surprise a lot of people. The team is an F tier. The quarterback is an S tier. But Watson probably won't be there. Same thing with Rodgers in Green Bay. But they're there now. That's what I'm rating it on. Next, we have Carson Wentz and the Colts. Carson Wentz, people forget, had an MVP type of season, but he's never been the same since that knee injury. Now, you could argue Frank Reich leaving the team played an impact in that. You could argue that maybe Carson Wentz just never really got back the same type of mojo he had. But Carson Wentz, I think, belongs in the B tier right at the end of it. Because I don't think he's terrible. I really don't. And you could argue Cousins might have a better nod than Carson Wentz, but Cousins has not had a season nearly as good as Wentz had that MVP year. And if you want to use, unfair accomplishment logic, Wentz has a ring, Cousins doesn't. The Rams, Matthew Stafford, in my opinion, is in the A tier. I think he's actually above Matt Ryan, right behind Josh Allen. Matt Stafford, extremely overlooked because of how much of a dumpster fire the Lions are. When he had Megatron, he was putting up some yardage, man. Matthew Stafford did amazing with him. And Matthew Stafford actually looked really good when Jim Caldwell was coaching the team. But obviously no coach since then has really been what the Lions are looking for. But Matt Stafford, I think, with Sean McVay this year, this is his first season with the Rams, I am extremely excited to see that. Next up, Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert, in my opinion, as much as I want to put him in the A tier because I'm a huge fan of his, I have to be fair. I can't be biased. I'm going to put him in the B tier right at the top, right above Dak Prescott. Herbert, I think, is going to be a star. I think Herbert has everything he needs. And when you're in a division with Patrick Mahomes, who, by the way, is next and easily in the S tier, that's a big deal. And I'm actually going to be a jerk and put Patrick Mahomes at the top of the S tier. Now, before I get a lot of nasty comments because I can see it coming, I am not saying he's better than Tom Brady or anybody on this list. I'm not saying that. But Patrick Mahomes at this stage of his career, minus the rings, was more accomplished than Brady on the field. At this point, 3 years into the league, well, this is his 4th year, Mahomes has an MVP. Mahomes has a Super Bowl MVP. Mahomes is part of a club that only Peyton Manning, I believe, is in, with 50 touchdowns and 5,000 yards, something Brady does not have even now. And at this stage of his career, he didn't have that. If we're measuring it overall, then Brady goes here. Again, I'm not saying Mahomes is better. I'm saying right now, in terms of longevity, in terms of what he's gotten done 4 years in, Mahomes is here. But if we're going overall, Brady is here. So let's just clear that up right off the bat. Tennessee, Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill really proved himself. I've actually said Tannehill was a diamond in the rough, and I'm going to put him in the A tier right at the end. Adam Gase is a career killer. And we saw that when Tannehill went over to Tennessee. And he's looked really good, and I think he'll continue to improve. Ryan Tannehill, there's a reason why he was picked in the first round. And he's looked like a first-round quarterback both years he started in Tennessee. And I think Tannehill is going to finish his career on a high. And I don't know if he'll win the Super Bowl. I don't know if he'll get there. But I think that Tannehill gives the Titans the best chance to win in terms of stability at the quarterback position. San Francisco, Jimmy Garoppolo. This is a quarterback that did get to the Super Bowl. Technically 3 times total because he won 2 championships by sitting on the bench when Tom Brady was doing all the heavy lifting. But as a starter, I'm going to put him probably in the D tier right behind Winston. Because I don't think Garoppolo has really shown that he can thrive, even in an offense like Kyle Shanahan's, which has really been made to help quarterbacks thrive. I haven't seen Garoppolo take those strides. Next up is Philadelphia, Jalen Hurts. Another C-tier quarterback we can't judge. And everybody is big on Jalen Hurts. I'm very eager to see what kind of talent he brings to the table. Next up is Denver. And if it's Drew Lock goes in the F tier. But because it's Teddy Bridgewater, and I'm assuming it is, I'm going to put Bridgewater in the C tier right ahead of Tua. Because as a whole, Teddy Bridgewater is not terrible. But he also hasn't been the same since that catastrophic leg injury, which honestly, who would? Bridgewater, he looked not good enough in Carolina for them to keep him, but he also hasn't looked bad enough to be considered a terrible quarterback. I just think that he hasn't really had the right coach yet. And maybe he thrives in Denver with Pat Shurmur as the offensive coordinator. Maybe. I don't know. We'll find out. Sam Darnold. Right now, as much as I believe Sam Darnold will improve, I have to put him in the D tier right behind Garoppolo. Because I think his ceiling is higher, but I think the performance hasn't been there. Next up is Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, in terms of what he's done up to now, D tier, behind Garoppolo. I think this is going to change. I think it can easily be middle to the high end of the C tier by the end of this year, especially with the moves they've made in the offseason. But for right now, that's where they are. Washington, I don't know who the quarterback is. That's not a good start. I don't know if it's Heineke. I don't know if it's Fitzpatrick. I'm assuming it's Fitzpatrick, and if so, bottom end of the C tier. Kyler Murray with Arizona. I think he's going to be on the high end of the B tier right above Justin Herbert. He could be A tier this year. I think Kyler Murray looked good last year in terms of improvement. I want to see another year of that. Russell Wilson, I'll say high end of the A tier, right at the top. He's very talented, and I think he's going to continue to improve. And you could argue Russell Wilson is S tier. You could argue that. But I think A tier is probably right. New York, can't judge Zach Wilson yet. We haven't seen him take a snap. Cam Newton, I'll put Cam Newton in the B tier right above Mayfield. Because I do think that Cam has talent. I haven't seen a lot of the dynamic throwing as of late, but that can change. And I think it could change based on the moves New England made. So there you go. No one ends up in the F tier. We got a few people in the S tier. And again, you can make what you want about that. I'm not saying Mahomes is better, but obviously, I'll see you guys in the next video if you like what you saw.